now, you have probably heard that President Trump passed an executive order that is cracking down on the Visa Mastercard censorship. And to some extent, that is actually what this does, but that is not the primary purpose of this executive order. For the longest time, institutions like PayPal would single out right wing content creators and deplatform them, keeping their money and pulling a bunch of other shenanigans. And I believe Chase Bank also did something similar to that. And this bill aims to make sure that banks and all financial institutions cannot do that anymore. It also very fortunate for us gamers and you gooners out there, or should I say fellow gooners out there, it also takes care of that problem too about the censorship. Kind of. Where other people are talking about news covering this, we're just going to go through the executive order itself. Guaranteeing fair banking for all Americans. Now, Section 1 just describes what the purpose of this bill is. For the point of this video, it's just kind of really pointless to go through that part. But this bill will be linked in the description, so if you want to read through Section 1, you can go and do so yourself. Section 2 is where this bill really starts kicking off, telling you exactly what it is doing, rather than why it's existing. Section 2, Policy. It is the policy of the United States that no American should be denied access to financial services because of their constitutionally or statutorily protected beliefs, affiliations, or political views, and to ensure that the politicization or unlawful debanking is not used as a tool to inhibit such beliefs, affiliations, or political views. Banking decisions must instead be made on the basis of individualized, objective, and risk-based analysis. Translation: you can deny someone access to banking if they look suspiciously fraudulent. You can deny them if their risk is too high, but you cannot deny them on the basis of political views, religious views, or any other already established and protected beliefs, affiliations, or political views. On the surface, that does not sound like it's going to affect the credit card processors going after gaming content. But this bill continues onward. Section 3, Definitions. Let me teach you a lesson about legalese. It sounds like English, it is not. If it doesn't specify what a definition is, it will default back to Black Law's dictionary, and that very often is a completely different language than commonly spoken English. Very important lesson to remember whenever you're dealing with legalese. Section 3, Definitions. A. The term politicized or unlawful banking refers to an act by a bank, savings association, credit union, or other financial services provider to directly or indirectly adversely restrict access to or adversely modify the conditions of accounts, loans, or other banking products or financial services of any customer or potential customer on the basis that customers or potential customers or religious beliefs, or on the basis of the customer or potential customer's lawful business activities that the financial service provider disagrees with or disfavors for political reasons. There we get into you cannot remove games because you don't like gooning. But it does get more specific about that issue going onward, though that right there is, again, largely targeting companies like PayPal and other banks that throughout the years actually deplatformed conservatives, right-leaning people. As when it comes down to the left-right, I saw a breakdown this a while ago. It's like 90% of the left have one homogenized ideology. Meanwhile, like only 30 some odd percent of the right are actually conservative or conservative adjacent. So the right has a way larger variety of ideals. The center has a way larger variety of ideals. And the left is largely homogenous, which is why we have to specify and other right-leaning ideals, as the right does not just mean conservative, as much as the conservatives would love to claim so. Nor does populism mean conservative either. It does take a lot of ideals from conservatism, but it also takes a lot of ideals from the center and even some from the left, where it is applicable for the betterment of the people. B. The term federal banking regulators refers to the Small Business Administration, SBA, and the federal member agencies of the Financial Stability Oversight Council with supervising and regulatory authorities over banks, savings associations, or credit unions. Section 4. Removing reputational risk and politicized or unlawful debanking. This here will greatly touch on what Visa and Mastercard are doing to gaming, as they claim that they want this stuff removed, not just in America, but they've been doing a lot of shady stuff over in Japan too. And not just about gooning, they actually shut down a geek dating service or anime dating service where, people who like anime can like get together and date in Japan. They closed that down because they claimed it was a reputational risk or against their brand image and other such nonsense. Which is why Japan right now is even looking to going after Visa and MasterCard as well, while they attempt to gaslight us all into believing that they didn't do anything wrong. A. Within 180 days of the date of this order, each appropriate federal banking regulator shall, to the greatest extent permitted by law, remove the use of reputational risk or the equivalent concepts that could result in politicized or unlawful debanking, as well as any other considerations that could be used to engage in such debanking, from their guidance documents, manuals, and other materials, other than existing regulations or materials requiring notice and comment rulemaking used to regulate or examine financial institutions over which they have jurisdictions. The removal of such concepts shall be made clear by each appropriate federal banking regulator through formal guidance to the examiners. The federal banking regulator shall also consider rescinding or amending existing regulations consistent with applicable law to eliminate or amend any regulations that could result in politicized or unlawful debanking, and to ensure that any regulated firm's or individual's reputation is considered for regulatory, supervisory, banking, or enforcement purposes solely to the extent necessary to reach a reasonable and apolitical risk-based assessment. Or in a lot fewer words, these agencies are going to make all the banks remove this language from their documents, which doesn't sound like it's really going to do much because you can remove it from your documents and then keep doing it. But I'm sure that this is going to come with more regulatory action, which this bill does mention later. But for the time being, they're going to begin ordering the removal, which is kind of we're not cracking down on this yet, but we're about to. So you have ample time to be in compliance with the new law coming down the road. Kind of warning. B. The Small Business Association shall, within 60 days of the date of this order, give notice to all financial institutions with which it guarantees loans under its lending programs, requiring that each financial institution that is subject to the Small Business Administration's jurisdiction supervision. I, within 120 days of the date of this order, make reasonable efforts to identify and reinstate any previous clients of the institution or subsidiaries denied services through a politicized or unlawful debanking action in violation of a statutory or regulatory requirement under Section 7A of the Small Business Act 15 USC 636, or any requirement in a standard operating procedural manual or policy notice related to a program or function of the Office of Capital Access, with a notice of reinstatement sent to the victim. 2. Within 120 days of the date of this order, identifies all potential clients denied access to financial services provided by the financial institution or any subsidiaries through a politicized or unlawful debanking action in violation of a statutory or regulatory requirement under Section 7A of the Small Business Act, or any requirement in a standard operating procedures manual or policy notice related to a program or function of the Office of Capital Access, and provides notice to each victim advising of the denied access and the renewed option to engage in such services previously denied. And 3, within 120 days of the date of this order, identifies all potential clients denied access to payment processing services provided by a financial institution or any subsidiary through a politicized or unlawful debanking action in violation of statutory blah 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 blah, and provides notice to each victim advising of the denied access and renewed option to engage in such services previously denied. So the banks and financial institutions have to let the people know that they can do banking again. The people who had their rights violated will be notified that they can take action, and they will be notified that they can resume banking. Section 5. Scrutinizing politicized or unlawful debanking. A. Within 180 days of the dates of this order, the Secretary of Treasury, in consultation with the Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, shall develop a comprehensive strategy for further measures to combat politicized or unlawful debanking activities of financial regulators and financial institutions across the federal government, including consideration of legislative or regulatory options to eliminate such debanking. Remember when I said earlier that this is a, hey, we're only telling you to remove this from your books right now, which is a hint that we're about to drop the hammer on this and you better be in compliance before we get there, or one of you is going to be made an example of? Now we're getting to that point in the order. B. Within 120 days of the date of this order, each federal banking regulator shall conduct a review to identify financial institutions subject to its jurisdiction that have had any past or current formal or informal policies or practices that required, encourage, or otherwise influence such financial institutions to engage in politicized or unlawful banking, to take appropriate remedial action to the extent authorized and consistent with applicable law, including levying fines, issuing consent decrees, or imposing other disciplinary measures against any financial institution subject to the jurisdiction of such federal banking regulator, that such federal banking regulator finds has engaged in politicized or unlawful banking that violates applicable law, including Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act 15 USC 45, Section 1031 of the Consumer Financial Protection Act 12 USC 5531, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. If you haven't noticed, a lot of our problems stem from there being rules that financial institutions and even corporations just flat out ignore and don't follow, and then the government doesn't punish them like they're supposed to. What this section does is tell the people that are responsible for punishing these people to punish these people. Section C. Within 180 days of the date of this order, the federal banking regulator shall review their current supervisory and compliant data to identify any financial institution that is engaged in unlawful debanking on the basis of religion, and if such financial institution is unable to obtain compliance within meaning of 15 USC 1691 and 1691 EG, refer such matters to the Attorney General for applicable civil action as appropriate. They about to get screwed. And this last section here, it's basically in every executive order. It boils down to, do it within the law. This will not inconvenience the federal government, and other such related clauses. In this case, we'll just go through it anyway. A lot of times I'll just skip this section here because it's pretty pedantic. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to the executive department or agency, or the head of thereof, or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, and legislative purposes. B. This order shall be implemented and consistent with applicable law, subject to availability of appropriations. C. This order is not intended to and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable by law or in equity by any party against the United States, i.e., you can't use this against the government, its department, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. D. The cost of publication of this order shall be borne by the Small Business Administration. Like I said, you can't use it against the government. It has to be done lawfully. Now, I think where was it? One of these sections here that starts talking about the financial institutions having to undo what they're doing. If you've been following what's happening to Arch with PayPal, I don't know if it will directly impact him, but it would be very applicable to him before we start getting into, the anti gooning stuff. Overall, what this executive order does is it more focuses on stopping these institutions from discriminating against people politically and religiously, which they have done for quite a long time. If you have not been following politics channels, this has been well documented across the right leaning content creation sphere. This is nothing new. It's been an ongoing issue. And that is primarily what this bill is cracking down on. It also just so happens to be cracking down on them censoring gooning and gooning materials because they're using the same stuff in their businesses and their books to crack down on the right and the people in the center who they don't like, that they're using to crack down on gooning material. Overall, this is a fairly good executive order. The two biggest parts that are appreciable is that it's giving these institutions a warning that new legislation is coming. You better be in compliance with it before it even gets here. And it tells the government to, hey, you know that the law says, you're supposed to be punishing these people for breaking the law, get to it. How severely these companies get punished? Well, there's a revolving door with the government, so don't hold your breath. The fortunate news is it is a step in the right direction, and that's good for all of us. Now, if you're still awake after reading through all this politicalese, let me know down in the comments and what you think, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.